snow drifted like powdered sugar across New York City, coating the glass towers and the glittering sidewalks of Fifth Avenue. Morning horns blared, taxis splashed through puddles, and the smell of roasted coffee beans wafted through the air, a blend of chaos and comfort that defined Café Lumiere. Inside the cafe, Lila Brooks balanced 3 steaming cups on a tray with the focus of someone used to surviving on little sleep and endless hope. Her curly brown hair was tied back in a loose bun, a few strands escaping to frame her tired but kind face. The little gold chain around her neck, a keepsake from her late grandmother, caught the morning light every time she turned. "Order for table 6, called her coworker. "Got it," Lila answered, slipping between crowded tables with the grace of a dancer. Her worn sneakers squeaked on the polished floor as she delivered the lattes to a group of businesswomen tapping away on laptops. At the far corner, a small boy sat patiently with a sketchbook and a cup of warm milk. Ben, her 7-year-old son, looked up as she passed by. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked, crouching to his eye level. He nodded with a grin that could melt the frost on any heart. "I drew you again, Mommy." She smiled, brushing a crumb from his cheek. The paper showed a stick-figure version of her, holding a tray with a big red heart above her head. "You made me look so happy," she whispered. "You are happy," he said proudly, "even when you're tired." Her throat tightened. Ben always noticed more than she wished he would. The cafe door jingled open, letting in a rush of cold air and the sound of expensive heels. Lila turned and froze. A man walked in like he owned the world. Tall, sharp-suited, his presence shifted the air itself. Ethan Cole, though she didn't know his name yet, moved with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed, not greeted. His dark overcoat brushed against his tailored suit, a faint trace of cologne, cedar and smoke, trailing behind him. He wasn't there for coffee. He was there because fate liked to play games. Outside, his sleek black car waited, engine running. Inside sat a little girl, nose pressed against a frosted window. Her name was Sophie, 6 years old, curls bouncing, eyes wide as she watched her father through the glass. She had his features, but her innocence softened them. "Daddy takes forever," she murmured to the driver. "He just needs coffee." The driver chuckled. Maybe he needs something sweeter than that. Inside, Ethan's phone buzzed as he waited in line. "Oliver," he said curtly, answering. On the other end, his assistant spoke quickly. "Sir, you have a dinner reservation tonight. 7 p.m. The, blind date." Ethan exhaled, unamused. "Cancel it." "Sir, you said you consider moving on. You've been alone for 3 years. Just dinner, no expectations." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't have time for strangers playing therapist." He hung up before Oliver could protest. Lila stepped forward, unaware of who he was. "Good morning. What can I get you?" Her voice was warm, too warm for someone used to cold people. Ethan looked up, and for the first time in years, something flickered in his chest. She wasn't striking in the way of models or socialites. She was real. There was a quiet strength in her eyes, a softness that unsettled him. "Black coffee," he said finally. "No sugar." She nodded, scribbling on the pad. "Rough morning." He blinked, startled by the question. "You could say that." She smiled gently. "Black coffee fixes everything." "Well, almost everything." He almost smiled back. Almost, but he didn't. He handed his card over, their fingers brushing for a heartbeat. Outside, Sophie was impatient now. She hopped out of the car just as Ethan stepped to the cafe door with his coffee. "Daddy," she squealed, "you took forever." Ethan's stern face softened instantly. He crouched to meet her eyes. "I was getting your favorite muffins." Her giggle was pure sunshine. But then, as Lila stepped outside to dump the trash, balancing a bin and pushing a heavy door open with her hip, the unexpected happened. A patch of ice near the curb sent her foot slipping, and the next thing she knew, hot coffee splashed from Ethan's cup, staining his coat and gloves. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." Lila gasped, rushing to grab napkins. "It's fine," Ethan said coolly, brushing at the spill. "Are you hurt?" "No, I just..." She looked up at him, cheeks flushed. "I didn't see the ice." Sophie tugged her father's sleeve and whispered loudly, "Daddy, she looks like Mommy." The world seemed to freeze. Lila blinked, caught between embarrassment and confusion. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly. "I'm sure your mommy was much prettier." But Sophie shook her head, eyes full of wonder. "No, you smile like her." Ethan straightened, discomfort flashing in his eyes. "Sophie, that's enough." Lila offered a final apologetic smile. "I really am sorry for the spill. Let me pay for cleaning." "It's nothing," he said shortly, then hesitated. Something about her lingered. "Still," she added gently, "thank you for not yelling. Most people would have." He looked at her, really looked. The sincerity in her face made something old and broken stir inside him. He didn't know her name, but for the first time in a long time, he wanted to. As she turned back into the cafe, Sophie peeked over his arm, whispering again, "Daddy, she really does look like Mommy." Ethan didn't answer. He just stood there, staring through the glass door where Lila disappeared, her laughter faint, her son's voice in the background. And somewhere deep inside him, beneath the layers of grief and pride, a single thought whispered back, "Maybe that's not an accident." The city glowed gold that evening, the kind of light that made glass buildings shimmer like they were made of honey. Taxis honked. Couples hurried down sidewalks wrapped in scarves, and the faint sound of jazz drifted from restaurant doors that opened and closed with laughter. Inside Le Chateau, one of New York's most elegant restaurants, a waiter carefully adjusted the candles on a private table for two. He checked his list twice. Cole, reservation for 7 o'clock. By the window, Ethan Cole sat waiting. Black suit, perfect tie, posture straight. To any onlooker, he was the image of composure. But behind that calm exterior, impatience pulsed beneath his skin. He'd almost canceled the dinner twice, but his assistant Oliver had been insistent. "You've built an empire, sir. Maybe it's time to build a life again." Ethan wasn't sure he wanted one. He glanced at his watch. 7:25. The seat across from him remained empty. The waiter returned with a nervous smile. "Would you like to order, sir? Perhaps the lady is running late." Ethan exhaled. Or she changed her mind. He didn't blame her. Maybe she Googled him. Seen the headlines. Tragic widower CEO of coal industries. Maybe she decided she didn't want a man with ghosts. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, slow, quiet. He turned his gaze toward the street, trying to ignore the pang of loneliness that crawled up his chest. Across the street, Lila Brooks tugged her scarf tighter around her neck as she hurried down the icy sidewalk. Her shift at Café Lumiere had just ended, and she was on her way to deliver a forgotten catering order to that same restaurant. Beside her, Ben trotted along in his little wool coat, holding her hand. His gloves were torn at the fingertips, but he didn't complain. "Mommy, do rich people really eat that much food?" Lila laughed softly. "Sometimes, yes, but they also pay for it, so we shouldn't complain." When she reached the back door, she handed off the food to the staff and was about to leave when a waiter hurried over. "Ma'am, the main entrance is quicker to the street. Go through the front. The kitchen exits slippery." So she did. As Lila stepped into the grand dining room, she felt suddenly out of place. Crystal chandeliers, polished marble, the faint sound of violins. She was still in her work uniform, her cheeks pink from the cold. And there, at the window table, sat the man from that morning. Ethan looked up, surprised and stunned. She froze. "Oh, it's you." He rose slightly from his seat, polite but startled. "You work here too?" "Sort of," she said quickly, "just making a delivery." "I didn't mean to intrude." Before he could reply, a soft, familiar voice called out, "Daddy." Sophie Cole came running, escorted by Martha, their housekeeper. She wore a sparkly white dress and a pink bow in her hair, looking every bit like a little princess. Ethan's eyes widened. "Sophie, what are you doing here?" Martha smiled apologetically. "She begged me, sir. She said you'd be lonely." Sophie's gaze shifted and landed on Lila. Her small mouth fell open. "It's you." Lila knelt instinctively as Sophie ran over. "Hey there, Snowflake. You remember me?" Sophie nodded eagerly. You're the lady from the coffee shop. Daddy said you spilled on him. Ethan coughed, embarrassed. That's not exactly how I put it. Lila chuckled softly, her laughter like sunlight through a window. Sophie's eyes sparkled. Daddy, can she sit with us? Ethan froze. Sophie, please. Sophie tugged at his sleeve. You said we could stay for dinner, but you're sad again. She makes you smile. Lila's face turned crimson. That's very sweet, but I really should. Please. Sophie repeated, this time looking up at Lila with such innocent pleading that neither adult could resist. Ethan sighed, just for a few minutes, then... Lila hesitated, then smiled faintly. Only if you promise not to spill anything this time. He gave a tiny smirk. Deal. The waiter hurried over, startled to see an unplanned guest, but too polite to question the scene. Lila took the seat across from Ethan, hands folded nervously on her lap. Sophie slid into the chair beside her, beaming as though she'd just fixed the whole world. What do you do, Miss Lila? Sophie asked, eyes wide with curiosity. I make coffee and carry plates. Lila said warmly. But someday I'll open my own café. That's amazing, Sophie said, clapping her hands. Mommy used to bake cupcakes. Ethan stiffened, that familiar ache returning. But when he looked at Lila, her expression wasn't pity. It was quiet understanding. Lila spoke softly. Your mom must have been wonderful. She was, Sophie said proudly. She used to sing to me every night. Daddy doesn't sing. Ethan looked away, his throat tightening. My voice would scare the neighbors. Lila smiled gently, cutting through the heaviness. Then maybe she sings for both of you now. Something in those words landed deep inside Ethan, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Dinner arrived. Sophie and Ben shared macaroni and whispered jokes. Lila laughed easily, and even Ethan caught himself smiling. He didn't notice the curious stares from nearby tables. The billionaire CEO sitting with a waitress and 2 children, laughing like an ordinary man. For the first time in a long time, the world outside that table didn't matter. When dessert came, Sophie offered Lila a spoonful of her ice cream. You should come again. Daddy's funny when you're around. Lila chuckled. I'll keep that in mind. When the check arrived, she instinctively reached for her wallet. You don't need to, Ethan said quietly. I know, she replied, but I want to. He looked at her, this woman who had so little yet offered so much, and for once, he didn't argue. He simply nodded. As they stepped outside, snow falling softly around them, Sophie wrapped her small hand around Lila's fingers. You'll come back, right? Lila knelt again, brushing a snowflake from Sophie's hair. If your dad doesn't mind. Sophie turned to him expectantly. Ethan's gaze softened. We'll see. But deep down, he already knew. He wanted her to. The next morning, sunlight spilled over the Manhattan skyline, bouncing off glass buildings and flooding Ethan Cole's penthouse with a muted glow. It was beautiful and empty. The silence in his home was the kind that echoed. Every polished surface reflected memories he couldn't escape. The piano his late wife Claire once played, the bookshelf filled with unread novels, the scent of her favorite lavender candle still faintly clinging to the corners of his mind. Ethan stood by the window with a cup of coffee, his reflection ghosted by the city beyond. Across the skyline, he could almost see her, laughing alive, before it all disappeared in the crash 3 years ago. He took a slow sip and exhaled, trying to let go of last night's dinner, of the woman with the kind eyes who made Sophie laugh harder than she had in months. But he couldn't. He hadn't expected to feel anything. And yet, the memory of Lila Brooks, her laughter, her warmth, the way she looked at Sophie with genuine care, haunted him more than any board meeting ever could. Down in the Lower East Side, Lila was running late for her morning shift at Café Lumiere. Again, she held Ben's hand as they dashed through slush and puddles. He was chattering nonstop about the fancy dinner last night. Mommy, that man was nice. He looked like the people in the magazines at the barber shop. Lila laughed breathlessly. You think every man in a suit is rich. He was rich. Ben insisted. His shoes were shiny. And his daughter said you look like her mommy. Lila's smile faded for a moment, her heart twisting. She's just a sweet girl, missing someone. When they reached the cafe, her manager, Rita, handed her a pile of orders. Full house today, Lila. We got a company breakfast in 20. Lila nodded, tying her apron tighter. Got it. But she couldn't stop thinking about Sophie, those innocent eyes, her small hand in hers. The child had a way of breaking past her defenses, and her father, she shook the thought away. Men like him lived in another world. She'd learned long ago what happened when she stepped into worlds she didn't belong in. Later that afternoon, fate decided to twist their paths again. Ethan was at the community outreach meeting for the Cole Foundation, one of the few things he still cared about since Claire's passing. The foundation supported single parents, a cause Claire had once championed passionately. Sir, Oliver said, tapping a file, the winter coat drives tomorrow. We got volunteers lined up, but we still need on-site coordinators. Fine, Ethan replied, distracted. I'll stop by. Oliver hesitated. You haven't done a public event in a while. Ethan gave him a look. I'll survive a few handshakes. The next day, the winter coat drive transformed a downtown community hall into a cozy chaos of warmth and laughter. Boxes of donated jackets, scarves, and mittens filled the tables. Children ran around giggling as volunteers helped them try on new coats. Among them was Lila, bundled in a worn parka, hair tucked under a wool hat, helping a little girl zip her coat. Her smile was radiant despite the exhaustion in her eyes. When Ethan arrived, the media turned. Cameras flashed, journalists whispered. He nodded politely, doing his duty, but when his gaze swept across the room, it stopped. Her. For a moment, the world blurred. The hum of voices faded. All he could see was her kneeling beside a child, her face lit with kindness. Lila looked up and froze. Their eyes met across the room. Surprise, warmth, something unspoken passed between them. He approached slowly. We meet again, he said, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. She laughed nervously. You have a habit of showing up where I least expect you. I could say the same. Ben ran over, holding two mismatched gloves. Mom, look, they fit. Ethan knelt to help him adjust them. Good choice, he said warmly. You've got an eye for detail. Ben grinned. Mom says that's because I see things other people miss. Lila's heart fluttered. She hadn't seen Ethan smile like that before, genuine, unguarded. Hours passed in easy rhythm. Ethan helped distribute boxes, spoke with families, even laughed once or twice. The cameras loved him, but what struck everyone more was how he lingered, talking with the volunteers instead of rushing off. When the event wrapped up, Lila stood outside sipping cocoa, cheeks pink from the cold. Ethan joined her. Not your usual crowd, she teased. He smirked. You assume I only talk to executives. Don't you? Maybe I should talk to more waitresses. She laughed. The sound caught him off guard, melting the lass's reserve. They stood in companionable silence, snow falling between them. Then Lila spoke softly. Your daughter's amazing. She's got a heart of gold. She's my reason for everything, Ethan said. Sometimes I wonder if she remembers her mother or just the stories I tell her. Lila's voice gentled. Kids don't forget love, Ethan, even if faces fade. He looked at her, really looked, and realized that she carried her own kind of grief, quiet but powerful. He wanted to know what had broken her, what had made her so strong. But she was already checking her watch. I should go. Ben's got homework. Ethan nodded slowly, fighting the instinct to stop her. Thank you for today. She smiled. I should be thanking you. Without this coat drive, half the neighborhood kids would be freezing. As she turned to leave, Sophie came running from Martha's car. Lila, she squealed, throwing her arms around her waist. Daddy said I could come help next time. Will you be there? Lila's eyes softened. If they'll have me... Sophie looked up at Ethan with a hopeful grin. Can she come for dinner again, Daddy? Ethan opened his mouth, and for once, words failed him. Lila laughed, saving him. Maybe someday, Snowflake. Let's see what the universe decides. As she walked away, her hand in Ben's, Ethan watched her disappear into the swirling snow. Oliver came up beside him quietly. "You're smiling, sir." Ethan blinked. "Am I?" "Yes. It's been a while." Ethan didn't answer. He just looked toward the falling snow where Lila had gone and whispered to himself, "Maybe this time the universe knows what it's doing." A week passed since the coat drive, yet Ethan Cole couldn't focus on work the same way anymore. His office, the 47th floor Cole Industries, offered a breathtaking view of Manhattan, but lately the glass reflected more memories and ambition. He stared at spreadsheets without seeing them, answered calls without listening, and brushed off Oliver's teasing comments about daydreaming during meetings. Something was shifting, quietly, gently, in the space between his loneliness and hope. Meanwhile, Lila Brooks was back at Café Lumiere, humming softly as she restocked pastries. The cafe was warm, alive with chatter and jazz. Ben was in the corner as usual, doing homework while sipping cocoa, occasionally peeking up at his mom. "Earth to Lila," her co-worker Maya said with a grin. "You've been smiling at muffins for 10 minutes. Spill it." Lila laughed, shaking her head. "It's nothing." "Uh-huh. Nothing named Ethan Cole, maybe?" Lila nearly dropped a tray. Maya, her friend, raised her brows. "Girl, that's the CEO who helped at the coat drive, right? The one whose daughter worships you." "Worships is a strong word," Lila said, blushing. "She's just a sweet little girl." Maya smirked. "Sweet little girl whose dad looks at you like you hung the moon." Before Lila could respond, the door chimed, and the subject of their conversation walked in. Ethan stood at the threshold, shaking snow from his coat. The cafe suddenly felt smaller, warmer. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on her. Lila, wiping a counter, head bowed in concentration. When she looked up, surprise flickered across her face. "Mr. Cole." "Ethan," he corrected gently. She hesitated. "What brings you here? Missing the black coffee from last time?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe the company that came with it." Maya nearly dropped her coffee pot. Lila shot her a warning glance, then turned back to Ethan. "Well, I can make you another. On the house this time." "I'd rather pay," he said softly. "I owe you enough for dry cleaning." She laughed, shaking her head as she prepared his drink. "You don't owe me anything, Ethan." He took a seat near the window, the same seat he'd taken the first day they met. Sophie wasn't with him today, but her absence was felt in the small smile he wore when he looked at the children playing outside. When Lila brought his coffee, she lingered for a moment. "You seem different today. Lighter." "Maybe I've had better coffee lately," he teased. She rolled her eyes but smiled. "You should write Hallmark cards." "I'll stick to running companies," he replied, but his tone softened. "What about you? You always as busy." "Always," she said with a shrug. "Keeps me from thinking too much." "About what?" She hesitated, then answered quietly, "About everything I still have to fix." Their eyes met, a shared understanding passing between two people who'd both carried too much alone for too long. Outside, the city glimmered under a soft curtain of snow. Inside, warmth blossomed in a place neither of them expected. After a while, Ethan stood to leave. "There's a community event next weekend," he said. "A fundraiser for single parents. My company sponsors it. You should come if you're free." Lila blinked. "You're inviting me?" "Inviting," he said with a small smile. "Not interviewing. No board members. No ties required." She laughed, surprised by his charm. "All right, maybe I'll bring Ben if I can find a babysitter." He grinned. "I think I know someone good with kids." The following weekend, the fundraiser buzzed with color and laughter inside a midtown hall. Balloons floated near the ceiling, and tables overflowed with pastries and hot cocoa. Lila arrived with Ben, her nerves fluttering like the snow outside. She wore a simple navy dress, hair let down for once. When Ethan saw her walk in, his breath caught. She wasn't glamorous in the traditional sense, but something about her presence filled the room with quiet grace. "Glad you made it," he said, offering her a cup of cocoa. "Wouldn't miss it," she replied. "Ben's already made friends." Indeed. Ben was laughing with Sophie near a crafts table. the two children painting Christmas ornaments under Martha's watchful eye. Lila's gaze softened as she watched them. They look like they've known each other forever. Ethan nodded. Kids don't need time to trust. They just feel it. Their hands brushed as he handed her a napkin. She didn't pull away. The evening carried on like a dream, music, laughter, and gentle snow drifting past the tall windows. When the lights dimmed for the final speech, Ethan stepped on stage, surprising everyone. He spoke not like a CEO, but like a man rediscovering his heart. My late wife believed that no one is truly alone, not if we reach out, not if we care. Tonight, I saw that truth again. His eyes found Lila's in the crowd, holding for just a beat longer than necessary. Sometimes, hope doesn't come as a grand miracle, he continued. Sometimes it's a small smile or a stranger reminds you that life still has warmth left in it. When the applause faded, Lila's eyes glistened. He had said what she'd never had words for. As people began leaving, Lila found him near the coat rack, adjusting Sophie's scarf. "You spoke beautifully," she said. "I meant every word," he replied. She smiled softly. Claire will be proud. Ethan blinked, startled, but not hurt. You remembered her name. She's part of who you are. Sophie talks about her like she's still here. She is, he said, touching his chest. At least she was, until lately. He didn't finish, but the meaning hung between them. Outside, as they stepped into the softly falling snow, Sophie ran ahead with Ben, their laughter echoing down the street. Ethan looked at Lila and said quietly, "Thank you for coming." She tilted her head. "For the invitation? For reminding me what it feels like to live again." Lila's heart fluttered in her chest, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like the poor waitress from the café. She felt seen. The city woke under a silver dawn, snow blanketing the streets like untouched canvas. Inside Ethan's penthouse, laughter filled the air. Sophie and Ben were building a fort out of sofa cushions, while Martha supervised with amused patience. Lila sat on the floor beside them, sipping tea, warmth spreading through her chest like sunlight. It had been a week since the fundraiser, and somehow she and Sophie had become inseparable. Ethan often invited them over for playdates, though everyone knew they were more than that. He'd find reason to linger near Lila, a shared joke, a brief touch when passing coffee, the long silences that spoke more than words. That morning, Ethan appeared from his study, sleeves rolled up, tie loose. "You're all conspiring to overthrow the furniture, I see." Sophie giggled. "We're building a castle. Mommy Lila's a queen." Lila froze, teacup halfway to her lips. Ethan looked at his daughter, surprised, but he didn't correct her. "Then I suppose that makes me the royal advisor," he said lightly, earning laughter from the children. Lila smiled, but her heart fluttered with something deeper, something dangerous. She hadn't heard anyone call her mommy in years except Ben, and hearing it from Sophie tugged at a tenderness she wasn't prepared for. When the children ran off to fetch more blankets, Ethan turned to her. "Sorry if that made you uncomfortable." "Sophie, she just—" "Don't apologize," Lila interrupted softly. "She's a sweet girl. She misses her mother." He nodded. "She does. But lately, she's been smiling again. That's because of you." Their eyes met, quiet, sincere, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to slow. Then Lila's phone buzzed. She checked the screen, her smile fading. Marcus, Ben's father. The name she hadn't seen in years. Marcus had left when Ben was 2, chasing money, chasing freedom. The last she heard, he was working somewhere in Florida. He'd promised to send support. He never did. Now his texts read, "We need to talk. I'm in New York. I want to see my son." Lila's hand trembled. The past she'd buried beneath exhaustion and survival had suddenly clawed its way back. Ethan noticed her change in expression. "Everything all right?" She forced a smile. "Just someone from before." That evening, she met Marcus at a small diner on the Lower East Side. The bell above the door jingled as she walked in. He was already there, slick hair, expensive jacket, phone on the table. Same charming smirk, but the edges were harder now. "Lila," he said, standing to greet her. You look good. She sat across from him, arms folded. What do you want, Marcus? To see my kid, he said casually. I've changed. I'm stable now. Got my own business. She stared at him. You walked out on us. You don't get to show up and pretend to be a father. His smile faltered. Come on, I was young. Scared. You think you're perfect? Her jaw tightened. I'm not, but I stayed. Marcus leaned in. Look, I'm serious about being in Ben's life again. Maybe even yours. She froze. What? I've missed you, Lila. I see you online sometimes, working in that café, struggling. You deserve better. I can help. Anger rose in her throat. Help? The only thing you ever helped me do was learn how to survive alone. He frowned. What? You think that CEO guy's going to fix your life? The one you were seen with at that fundraiser. Her breath caught. You've been following me? He smirked. News travels fast when the guy is a billionaire. She stood abruptly. Stay away from me. From Ben. As she turned to leave, his voice hardened. You can't keep him from me, Lila. Legally, I'm still his father. Her hands shook as she stepped into the cold night. Snowflakes stung her cheeks like tiny shards of ice. The next day, Lila tried to focus at work, but her thoughts tangled into fear. Maya noticed. You okay? You look pale. Lila forced a laugh. Just tired. But exhaustion wasn't it. It was dread, the feeling that something precious was about to be ripped away. That afternoon, when she went to pick Ben from school, a sleek black car was parked nearby. Marcus leaned against it, waving. Hey, champ, he said brightly as Ben froze in confusion. Mom. Ben whispered. Lila stepped between them, heart pounding. Ben, get in the car. Marcus's smile turned cold. I told you, Lila. I'm not leaving again. She drove home in silence, Ben's small voice breaking through only once. Who was that man, Mom? She swallowed hard. Someone from before. You don't need to worry. But deep down, she knew worry was inevitable. Marcus wasn't just back. He was planning something. That night, Ethan called. Hey, I haven't heard from you all day. Is everything all right? Her voice cracked. No, Ethan, it's not. Within half an hour, he was at her door, concern etched into every line of his face. She told him everything, the text, the meeting, Marcus's threat. Ethan listened silently, then said in a low voice, He doesn't get to scare you. Or Ben. Tears welled in her eyes. You don't understand, Ethan. He could take him. He's the biological father. Then we'll fight him, he said firmly. You're not alone in this. She looked up, startled. We. Yes, we. He placed a hand over hers, steady and warm. Lila, I don't just care about Sophie being happy. I care about you, too. For the first time since Marcus's return, she breathed freely again. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft, endless, and quiet. But inside, something fierce began to stir, the promise that love could stand against even the past. Morning light poured through the window of Lila's small apartment, touching her face with a gentle warmth that couldn't chase away the worry in her heart. She hadn't slept all night. The echo of Marcus's threat haunted her like a shadow. Ben slept beside her, clutching his old teddy bear, the same one she bought from a thrift store when he was 3. His small, peaceful face reminded her what she was fighting for. She rose quietly, made coffee, and stared at the skyline beyond her narrow kitchen window. The world outside kept moving, cars honking, people rushing, while her own felt frozen in fear. When a knock came at the door, her stomach tightened. But it wasn't Marcus. It was Ethan, in a dark wool coat, holding a paper bag that smelled faintly of pastries and cinnamon. Did you eat? He asked, stepping inside without waiting for an answer. Lila blinked, startled but touched. You didn't have to. I wanted to, he said softly. He placed the bag on the counter and looked around her modest apartment. Faded wallpaper, second-hand furniture, the soft clutter of a life built from scratch. It wasn't luxury, but it was home. You've made a good life for him, he said, glancing toward Ben's room. Lila's eyes softened. I've tried. They sat at the small table, sunlight pooling between them. Ethan's tone turned quiet, serious. I spoke to my lawyer this morning. Her head snapped up. Your lawyer? Why? Because Marcus can't just reappear and threaten you. You have rights, Lila, and I can help you protect them. Her chest tightened. Ethan, I can't let you get involved. This is my mess. He leaned forward, eyes steady. Don't call yourself a mess. You're a mother trying to protect her child. That's strength. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of city traffic filled the silence. Then Ben shuffled into the room, rubbing his eyes. Mr. Cole, he mumbled sleepily. What are you doing here? Ethan smiled. Bringing breakfast. Ben grinned. You brought donuts? Of course, Ethan said. The kind with sprinkles. They ate together. Laughter slowly returning, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Afterward, Ethan crouched beside Ben. Hey, champ, how about you and Sophie come to the park today? I think she misses her fort-building buddy. Ben's face lit up. Can we, Mom? Lila hesitated, then nodded. All right, but only for a little while. Central Park sparkled under the winter sun, the snow crisp and white. Sophie ran across the field, pigtails bouncing, waving when she saw them. Ben, Mommy Lila, she shouted, her joy cutting through the cold. Ethan chuckled. I think she's adopted you both already. Lila smiled. I noticed. The children played while the adults watched from a bench nearby. For a while, the world seemed peaceful again. Ethan glanced at Lila. Do you ever think about starting over? Leaving all this behind? She sighed. Every day. But it's not that simple. My whole life's here. My job, Ben's school. What if it could be? He asked quietly. She turned to him, confused. What do you mean? He hesitated, then said, I could help. You deserve stability, not fear. A better home. A lawyer who'll make sure Marcus stays away. Ethan, she interrupted, voice trembling. Don't, please. He frowned. Don't what? Don't make me feel like a charity case. I can't. Before she could finish, Sophie ran up to them, tugging Ethan's sleeve. Daddy, look. She held out 2 snowflakes pressed between her mittens. One for you and one for Mommy Lila. Lila froze. Ethan looked at his daughter, at her innocent, glowing face, and smiled softly. Thank you, sweetheart. When Sophie ran back to Ben, Lila whispered, You should correct her. Why? He asked. She's not wrong about how she feels. Lila blinked, heart pounding. Ethan, we can't. This isn't. He looked into her eyes, voice steady. Lila, you and Ben have become part of our lives. You brought laughter back into my home. I don't want to lose that. She stared at him, at the man who'd spent years locked in grief, now daring to feel again. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. Marcus. Again. Her pulse raced as she opened the message. You can't hide him from me, Lila. We'll talk soon or I'll go to court. Her fingers went cold. Ethan noticed immediately. It's him, isn't it? She nodded, unable to speak. He exhaled slowly, then stood. Come with me. An hour later, they stood inside Cole Industries, the sleek, towering heart of Ethan's empire. Oliver, his assistant, handed Lila a folder. Mr. Cole said you'll need these documents. They'll help if he tries anything. Lila flipped through the papers, confused. What is all this? Legal assistance, housing options, emergency contacts, Ethan said. If Marcus pushes this, you won't face it alone. Tears welled in her eyes. Why are you doing this for me? He hesitated, then stepped closer. Because I made a promise to my daughter when her mother died. I told her I'd never let someone she loves get hurt again. She whispered, And you think she loves me? He smiled softly. I know she does. That evening, as the city glittered beneath them, Lila stood by the window of Ethan's office, watching the snow fall. He joined her, hands in his pockets. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. You don't have to thank me, he replied. Just let me keep that promise. They stood in silence, the kind that felt safe, full of unspoken understanding. When she turned to face him, his expression was different, open, gentle, almost vulnerable. "Ethan," she said softly, "you've already done more than anyone ever has for me." "Maybe," he murmured, "but it's not enough. Not if I can't keep you safe." Lila looked up at him, eyes glistening. "You already have." Outside, the snow thickened, and for the first time, they didn't look away. It wasn't a confession, not yet, but the beginning of one. And somewhere in the hallway, Sophie's laughter rang out, echoing like a promise of brighter days ahead. The courthouse loomed tall and gray against the winter sky, its steps glistening with frost. Lila stood outside with Ethan and her lawyer, a woman named Dana Whitmore, calm and composed beneath her navy coat. Ben clung to his mother's hand, wide-eyed and anxious. Inside, Marcus waited near the courtroom doors, smirking like a man who thought he'd already won. He wore a tailored suit, his arrogance radiating from every glance. "You ready?" Dana asked softly. Lila nodded, though her heart pounded. Ethan's voice was low but firm. "You're not doing this alone." She looked at him, his steady gaze, his quiet strength, and drew courage from it. The hearing began. Marcus's lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of a reformed father who simply wanted a chance to reconnect with his child. Lila listened jaw tight as he twisted the truth into something polished and false. Then it was her turn. Dana rose gracefully. "Your Honor, this man abandoned his son for over 6 years. He provided no financial support, no emotional care. My client has raised his child single-handedly, with love, stability, and sacrifice. Reintroducing the father now would not serve the child's best interest." The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Brooks, do you have anything to add?" Lila stood, voice trembling at first. "Your Honor, I don't want to keep my son from anyone who loves him. But love isn't words, it's action. And the only person who's been there for Ben is me. I can't let someone walk in and take him because they suddenly decided they care." Marcus scoffed. "You think a waitress can give him more than I can?" Lila turned, meeting his glare. "I may not have money, Marcus, but I've given him everything I have. Every morning, every night, every heartbeat. It's all been for him." Her voice cracked, raw, honest, powerful. Ethan's hands tightened on the bench before him, pride burning quietly in his chest. When the judge finally spoke, the courtroom fell silent. "Mr. Bennett," he said, "you've made no attempt to contact or support your son in years. This court sees no grounds to grant custody or visitation at this time. The child remains under sole guardianship of his mother, Lila Brooks." Marcus's face hardened. This isn't over. But when he turned to leave, Ethan stepped forward, his tone calm but icy. "Yes, it is." For a brief moment, the two men locked eyes, one driven by greed, the other by love. Marcus looked away first. Outside the courthouse, snowflakes drifted gently through the air. Ben ran into Lila's arms. "Mom, did we win?" She hugged him tightly. "Yes, baby, we did." Ethan stood nearby, watching them, relief softening his expression. When Lila looked up, tears shimmered her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to," he said. "Just promise me you'll let me stay in your life." Her lips parted in surprise. "Ethan," he hesitated, searching her face. "I don't want this to end here. Not after everything. Lila, Before he could finish, a small voice interrupted. "Daddy." Sophie came running from Martha's car, snow boots kicking up white dust. She threw herself into his arms, then looked up at Lila and Ben. "Mommy, Lila." "Ben." Ethan froze, but Lila only smiled. "Hey, sweetheart." Sophie beamed, then said something that made everyone still. "Daddy, can Mommy Lila come live with us? Please? She makes you smile again." Lila blinked, stunned. Ethan looked down at his daughter, then at Lila, a small, helpless laugh escaping him. "Out of the mouths of angels," he murmured. Later that evening, they gathered at Ethan's penthouse, not as guests and hosts, but as something that already felt like family. The fireplace crackled softly. Sophie and Ben were building another blanket fort, while Martha brought out hot chocolate. Lila stood by the window, the city lights stretching endlessly below. Ethan joined her, silent for a moment. "You know," he said, When Sophie first said you look like her mother, I thought she was just being a lonely kid. Lila smiled faintly. And now I think she saw something before I did. He turned toward her fully, his eyes reflecting the glow of the fire. I love my wife deeply, he said quietly. But when she died, I thought that was the end of that part of my heart. Then you walked into my life, not like a miracle, but like a second chance. You reminded me what kindness feels like. Lila's throat tightened. Ethan, he stepped closer. You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. She looked up at him, the man who'd helped her stand tall again, and whispered, I'm scared. Every time I start a hope, something tries to take it away. He brushed a tear from her cheek. Then let me be the one thing that stays. She didn't resist when he pulled her into his arms. The city outside faded. All that remained was warmth, safety, and a quiet realization that love had finally found its way back to both of them. The sound of laughter drew their attention. Sophie and Ben were crawling under the fort, giggling. Sophie peeked out and said, Daddy, come inside. There's room for everyone. Ethan chuckled, still holding Lila's hand. Think we should? Lila smiled. You first, Mr. C.O. He dropped to his knees, crawling inside with exaggerated clumsiness while the children shrieked with laughter. Lila followed, bumping her head on the blanket and laughing harder than she had in years. It wasn't a palace or a mansion, but for the first time, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Sophie leaned against Lila's shoulder and whispered, See, Daddy? I told you she looks like Mommy. Lila kissed the top of the girl's head, her heart swelling. Maybe, she said softly, but I think she's even braver. Ethan's gaze met hers over the children's heads, full of gratitude, affection, and the quiet promise of a new beginning. Outside, snow continued to fall, soft and steady, blanketing the city in light. Epilogue 1 year later. The café had changed. A new sign hung over the counter. Lila and Company. Business was booming, thanks to Ethan's silent partnership and Lila's tireless heart. Sophie and Ben sat at the corner table doing homework, Martha chatting nearby. Ethan arrived, still in his suit, but his expression softened as soon as he saw them. He crossed the café, kissed Lila's forehead, and handed her a bouquet of white lilies. Happy anniversary, he said quietly. She smiled. Of the café or of us? Both, he replied. She laughed softly, leaning against him as Sophie called out, Mommy, Daddy, come help with math. Lila met his eyes, her smile gentle and full. Looks like duty calls. He grinned. Best job I've ever had. Together, they joined the children, a small family stitched together not by perfection, but by love found when neither expected it. And as snow began to fall once more over New York City, Ethan Cole finally kept his promise. Not just as a father, but as a man who found his heart again. Daddy, she looks like Mommy.